Hey, it's Renee from the Craft Table. Welcome to another week of our summer embroidery stitch along. I believe this is week 4. We will be stitching the raised chain stitch this week. I hope you will notice that I am not on the side of the road this week. We did make it to Livingston, Montana. So that adventure is behind us, at least for a couple more weeks. We'll see what goes on with that. I personally am happy to be out of the RV. My husband, on the other hand, is already planning for us to take another trip somewhere. But for now, I'm here in Montana. I hope you've had a chance to watch the previous videos. You've made progress on your back stitch and stem stitch. After embroidering both of those, you've probably realized how interchangeable they are. If you wanted to stitch the back stitch in place of the stem stitch or vice versa, anywhere on this pattern, then either one of them would work. The raised chain stitch, however, the way that I designed this pattern, especially if you are working on the pre-printed panel that you purchase from the craft table, the lines are already marked specifically for the raised chain stitch. That doesn't mean you couldn't go over it with something that would cover it. If you had another stitch in mind that's that wide, you could, as long as you cover up your stitches, that's fine. But as far as the marks that are on the pattern, I did that specifically for the raised chain stitch. In previous patterns that I've designed, I have stitched the raised chain stitch, but I haven't really made the marks on the pattern specifically for the raised chain stitch because I've always wanted people to have the flexibility of doing whatever kind of stitch they wanted to do where. And I would just instruct people to mark those straight, parallel, consistently spaced lines that you use as a foundation for the stitch. So I've, recommended that you either mark those with a friction pen or you eyeball it. When we did the previous 2 stitch alongs where we were just embellishing a ready-made, for lack of a better word, fabric panel, those marks were not on there. But with this pattern specifically, I designed it as a teachable type pattern. So those marks on the pattern, you'll see when we get to the stitching thing, when we get to the stitching part of the video, the lines on the pattern are specifically there for helping you to stitch this stitch. We are going to embroider the raised chain stitch in 5 different areas on our design. You can see here, this is the color and stitch guide from the pattern. These tall 3 stems here, and then these 2 that bend over, these are the 5 places where we're going to embroider the raised chain stitch. Now, these 3 here are going to be, I'm going to embroider them using this darker green. It's not, I wouldn't call it a dark green, but it's darker of the 2. And then for these 2 areas, I'm going to be using this green. So you can see it over here. This is my fabric panel so far after doing the back stitch and the stem stitch. So again, I'm going to stitch here, 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 and here. Okay, I'm not traveling, so I was able to put my hoop in my hoop stand. Let me tighten this up a little bit. And I have my needle threaded with the darker green, and I am going to start at the base of this middle stem. So let me zoom in a little bit. And you begin, what we're going to do is we're going to do a straight stitch, working our way from the bottom all the way up to the top. So we're going to just bring the needle up. I'm right-handed, so I like to work from left to right. So I'm going to bring my needle up, the left part of that bottom straight stitch and then take my needle down to the back, right where the right side of that straight stitch. So all these parallel lines, I'm just going to do a straight stitch, working my way up. And that is the base, the foundation that we're going to use to do the raised chain stitch. If you wanted to speed up this process, what you could do, take your needle right there, and instead of pulling it to the back all the way through and then coming back up the top, you can just rock. You could rock the needle and bring it up like that and pull it through. Since I have my hoop in a stand, it's easier for me to just keep doing it this way. The first part of the stitch is now done. We've gotten all of our straight stitches stitched on the stem, bottom to top. For the second phase of this stitch, so I've finished that top straight stitch. So my needle is on the back, is the back of my fabric. I'm going to bring my needle up to the top by placing it right above that top straight stitch, and I am centering it over that straight stitch, and I'm gonna pull my needle through to the top. For this next part of the stitch, you want to have, let me pull this, zoom out a little bit. You want to have a pretty long piece of thread in your needle. So if you've only got just a little bit, like maybe this much, before you bring it up to the top, you might want to cut a new piece of thread, because we're going to be looping our needle and our thread through these top stitches, and it just makes it easier if we can get all the way to the bottom without having to change our thread. I have my needle up, my needle and thread up at the top. So without piercing the fabric, I'm going to run my needle underneath that top straight stitch from bottom to top, and I'm angling my needle a little bit to the left so that I don't go underneath that back stitch, that orange back stitch. And then I'm pulling my thread through. I have not pierced the fabric at all. Now I'm going to take the needle and I'm going to go underneath that same top straight stitch, but this time I'm going from top to bottom without piercing the fabric, without going into the orange back stitch above, without going into the green stitch below. And this is key. You zoom out again. This loose thread you want underneath the needle when you pull it through, because we're going to be making a loop. So I'm pulling the thread and I'm going to zoom back in. I'm going to do that same two steps for each straight stitch, working my way down to the bottom of our stem and where we began our straight stitches. Once again, I'm going to slide my needle under this time it's the second stitch. So the straight stitch below what you've just done, slide your needle under that straight stitch from bottom to top, angling it over a little bit to the left. Pull it through. You don't want to pull it super tight. And then I just sort of bring my thread over like this, so I kind of have this loop. And then I'm going to slide the needle underneath that same stitch, this time from top to bottom. Not piercing the fabric, not piercing any other stitch. And I'm pulling it through, making sure I've got this loop right here. Third time. Sliding my needle under the straight stitch from bottom to top, angling it a little bit away from what I've just done. If you go like this, and you're going to run into the previous stitches. So I'm going under that stitch with my needle and angling it this way and pulling it. I don't have to worry about the loop with this part of the stitch. It's when I go down. Same straight line, this time going under, this time going under the stitch, that straight stitch from top to bottom. Making sure I've got this loop as I pull it. And I'm going to just keep doing that for every single straight stitch. So I'm going under the straight stitch from bottom to top, pulling it through, going under the same straight stitch, this time top to bottom, making sure I have a loop when I pull it through. I'm going to zoom in even closer. So can you see how what the stitch is starting to look like? I did not take my own advice, and I do not have enough thread to make it all the way to the bottom. If this happens to you, this is what you would do. I'm going to take my needle and thread to the back of my fabric by making a straight stitch right above the next straight stitch. And then I will secure my thread in the back, cut my thread. So I have a fresh needle and thread. It's knotted. I'm going to bring my needle up from the back, kind of pretending like I'm starting, like this is the very beginning. But I want to make sure that there's not a gap between where I ended and where I began. So I'm going to just bring my needle up, kind of like right where where I did that straight stitch. And I'm just going to keep going. This is the last horizontal straight stitch that we have. So we'll be doing our very last raised chain stitch on this stem. So I'm going under, from bottom to top, under from top to bottom, making sure my needle does not catch on that indigo blue thread that represents the urn. Pulling it through. And now what I'm going to do is just take it straight to the back. I'm going below that straight green stitch and above the indigo blue urn stitches, and I'm taking it to the back. And I will secure it, cut the thread, and then I will be finished with that one stem. So this is the raised chain stitch. So following those same steps, I continue doing this raised chain stitch on these tall 3 center stems going into the urn, and then the 2 side stems were also embroidered using the raised chain stitch. Did you notice how much texture the raised chain stitch provides in your stitching? I think it's a great stitch. I absolutely love incorporating it anytime I can into a project. I enjoy actually doing the embroidery with this stitch. I find it very relaxing and meditative. It's especially when you get to the second step of doing the stitch. You just kind of get into a rhythm, and I really like it. I hope you do as well. If this is a new stitch for you, I like to suggest people learn it because it's one of those stitches that I think the end result looks much more complicated than the actual process. We don't really do this for anyone else, but it is nice to be able to show your stitching off and have people be really impressed by something that you've done. And again, especially since it's not complicated, but it looks really complicated. And that's why I call it one of those wow factor stitches. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the raised chain stitch. Thanks again for stitching along, and I will see you next week where we explore embroidering the Lazy Daisy stitch. Happy stitching.